They had been hunting the target for 3 days straight through the mountains, a dangerous fugitive who knew every rock and shadow better than the soldiers sent to capture him. The commander of the unit had finally called for a sniper, but when they brought her in, many of the men laughed quietly under their breath. She was younger than most of them, her rifle longer than her arms seemed strong enough to carry, and her silence made them uneasy. When she crouched near the edge of the ridge and peered down into the valley where the fugitive was last seen, one soldier muttered, "No one can make that shot." His words were carried by the wind, and others nodded in agreement, certain that this was going to end in failure. She didn't argue. She only adjusted the scope, listening to the distant echoes of boots and voices in the valley below, her breathing steady, her finger resting lightly against the trigger guard. The fugitive was clever, never staying still for long. He darted between rocks and tree cover, vanishing like smoke. The soldiers tracking him had been frustrated for days, losing men to his ambushes, but what made him most dangerous was his position now. He had taken refuge on a ledge almost 2 kilometers away, shielded by jagged stone and half-concealed branches. Any ordinary sniper would have had to crawl closer, risking discovery. But she lay flat against the ground, watching through her scope, studying the shift of the wind, the rhythm of his movements, the way he leaned forward just a fraction every time he checked his line of sight with the binoculars he carried. Her lips moved silently as she calculated distance and trajectory. The men behind her grew restless, one whispering again, "It's impossible. No one can make that shot." Her eyes didn't blink. She remembered the first time she had been told those same words years ago during her training. Her instructor had laughed when she picked the furthest target on the range, a black dot barely visible against the horizon. "No one can make that shot," he had said then too. But she had, and the echo of that single crack had silenced every doubt in the room. Now, lying on this cold stone ridge, she carried that memory with her, not as pride but as focus. Her world narrowed down to the scope, the target, the thin line of air between them. The sound of the soldiers shifting faded away. The ache in her elbows from the hard ground was forgotten. All that existed was the man leaning on the ledge, believing himself untouchable. The fugitive paused for a long moment, perhaps sensing the silence that hung too heavy in the valley. He raised his binoculars again, scanning the ridges. If he had looked just a little higher, just a little longer, he might have seen the faint glint of her lens in the sunlight. But he didn't. He lowered the binoculars, confident no eye could reach him from so far. Behind her, one soldier shook his head and muttered, "Waste of time." That was the last word he spoke before the shot came. They didn't even see her finger move. They didn't hear her breath quicken or her heart pound. They only heard the sudden crack echo against the mountains, sharp and final, followed by the dull sound of something heavy striking stone. The fugitive's body slid from the ledge, crumpling before he had the chance to even realize what had happened. The binoculars fell from his hand and shattered on the rocks below. The soldiers froze, their disbelief almost louder than the gunshot itself. For a second no one spoke, as if their minds refused to accept what their eyes were seeing. Then, slowly, every head turned toward her. She was already lowering the rifle, her expression calm, no triumph in her eyes, only the same quiet stillness that had carried her here. One of the men who had mocked her earlier whispered, "How?" But the word died in his throat. None of them dared to finish the question. They had seen the impossible and it was enough. She packed her rifle without ceremony, each movement practiced and efficient. The men around her watched in silence, a silence far heavier than before. They wanted to ask her how she had done it, to know what trick or secret she had used, but none found the courage to speak. It was as if the act itself had placed her in a world apart from them, a place they could not reach. She stood, slinging the rifle across her back, and for the first time her eyes met theirs. There was nothing in them but clarity, the kind of clarity born from endless practice, endless patience, and an unshakable belief in the shot no one else dared to take. Without a word, she walked past them, her boots crunching softly against the gravel, leaving behind only the echo of the impossible made real. As they made their way down to retrieve the body, the soldiers whispered to each other, but their voices were different now. The doubt was gone, replaced with awe, a kind of reverence they didn't quite understand themselves. Some called her a ghost, others a legend, though she was still very much human, walking a few steps ahead of them with the same steady rhythm as before. For her, it was just another mission, another target dropped. But for them, it was a moment they would carry for the rest of their lives, a story they would tell in barracks and around fires, always beginning with the same words, "No one can make that shot," and always ending with the silence that followed, as they remembered the truth of what they had witnessed. When they finally reached the fallen fugitive, The commander knelt and confirmed the kill with a slow nod. The men looked once more at her, waiting for some sign, a word, anything. But she gave them nothing. She didn't need to. The mountains themselves seemed to echo her skill, the ridges carrying the memory of that single shot long after the sound had faded. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, her mind already far from this valley, already searching for the next impossible task. Because for her, impossibility was nothing more than the beginning of focus. She had learned long ago that the world would always say, "No one can make that shot." And she had learned, too, that it was always wrong. The valley was quiet again, but the quiet felt wrong. The fugitive was down, yet her instincts told her this mission was far from over. As the soldiers gathered around the body, searching his pockets for intel or confirmation of his identity, she kept her distance. Her eyes scanned the ridges and tree lines, her ears tuned to every shift of wind and stone. Something in the air pressed against her chest, heavy and uneasy. The kill had been clean, perfect even, but it was too easy. Men like him didn't travel alone. She lowered her gaze and caught a flash of metal glinting in the distance, too small for sunlight on rock. She inhaled sharply. Another scope. Another sniper. She dropped to the ground an instant before the shot whistled past, snapping into the boulder where she had been standing. The men froze, confusion spreading across their faces before fear took over. They scrambled for cover, shouting to one another, searching the ridges for a shooter they couldn't see. But she already knew. She had felt the shift before the bullet even reached them. There wasn't just one more sniper. There were at least 3. Whoever had sent the fugitive had anticipated his fall and laid a trap for anyone who dared to take him. Her rifle was in her hands again before the second shot came. She rolled behind a jagged stone, steadying her breath as she adjusted her scope. The soldiers were panicking, firing blind into the cliffs, their rifles cracking without rhythm or aim. She ignored them. Panic was death. Silence was survival. She swept her scope across the ridges, scanning shadows and reflections. There. Movement. A gloved hand adjusting position on a far slope nearly 2 kilometers away. She adjusted for wind, exhaled, and fired. The echo rang across the valley. The shadow toppled forward. One down. The commander barked orders, pulling his men tighter into cover, but they were already pinned. Bullets struck stone inches from their heads, sparks flashing in the fading light. She stayed low, eyes pressed to the glass, searching for the next predator in the nest. A flicker near a fallen tree, too deliberate, too still. Another enemy sniper waiting. She fired again, the recoil jolting her shoulder, and the figure collapsed backward. But she didn't relax. If there were 2, there was a third. There was always a third. The soldiers looked to her now, not laughing, not doubting. Their eyes carried the same fear but mixed with a desperate hope. She didn't acknowledge them. The world narrowed again, her heartbeat steady, her focus absolute. She moved higher along the ridge, crawling over stone, keeping her silhouette hidden from sight. Another shot cracked, grazing so close she felt the heat against her cheek as stone shattered beside her. She ducked, shifted left, and waited. The enemy was patient, skilled, as trained as she was. This was no amateur. Whoever they were, they had studied her. Minutes stretched like hours. The wind grew sharper, carrying the scent of iron and dust. She slowed her breathing to almost nothing, waiting for a mistake. And then it came. A bird startled from the brush high on the ridge, wings flashing just above a shape that didn't belong. She didn't think. She only fired. The shape fell. The silence after was suffocating, broken only by the commander's order to move. They didn't linger. The trap had been clear and there might be more waiting. As they descended through the valley, carrying both relief and unease, she walked last, her rifle angled forward, eyes never leaving the horizon. The men whispered about her now as if she wasn't there, words like ghost and shadow passing between them. She ignored them. Legends were just stories soldiers told to feel braver. She wasn't a legend. She was flesh and bone could bleed. When they reached the extraction point, the commander pulled her aside. His face was tight, his voice low. "That wasn't just a fugitive," he said. "That was bait. Someone wanted us here, wanted to see who we'd send. And now they've seen." His eyes searched hers as if asking for answers she wasn't ready to give. She said nothing. She only cleaned her rifle with slow, practiced motions, every gesture as calm as if she were preparing for another training exercise. But inside she felt the shift. He was right. The impossible shot had been more than a mission. It had been a signal. Someone out there had been watching, waiting for proof of her existence. Now they had it. She had revealed herself with that single crack of the rifle, and in doing so had stepped onto a larger battlefield, one with no boundaries, no safety, and no room for error. That night, as the unit rested near the extraction camp, she stayed awake, her rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the firelight flickering against the canvas of their tents. The men dreamed, their breathing uneven but deep, their exhaustion heavy. She did not dream. She had trained herself long ago to let the mind stay awake while the body rested. And as the flames burned lower, she felt it again, the pressure in the air, the sense of eyes on her. She looked toward the darkness of the trees, and for the briefest moment she saw it, a silhouette standing too still, too quiet, watching. By the time she raised her rifle, it was gone. The soldiers never knew. They woke at dawn, laughing weakly, convinced the danger was over. Only she understood the truth. The game had just begun. Her impossible shot had killed more than a target. It had woken something far more dangerous, something that would follow her now, across valleys and borders, through silence and shadow. She stood at the edge of camp as the sun broke across the mountains, her eyes narrowing, her hands tightening on the rifle. Somewhere out there, another sniper was waiting. And when they finally met, it would not be about distance or wind or patience. It would be about survival. She turned and walked back toward the men, the fire in her chest steady and unshaken. No one could make that shot, they had said. But she had. And because she had, she knew there would be more. More impossible shots. More silent hunters. And she would take them all. The days after the mission blurred into silence. The unit moved through mountain passes under the cover of fog, carrying their victory like a fragile weight, but she knew better than to call it victory. It was unfinished. Each night she stayed awake, listening to the wind and the shifting gravel, waiting for the sound of a shot that never came. Whoever had been watching her hadn't revealed themselves fully. Not yet. That restraint told her everything. This was no ordinary hunter. This was a sniper like her, one who understood that the deadliest shot wasn't always the first one taken. By the fourth day, the commander finally admitted what she already knew. "We're being shadowed," he said quietly as the men set up camp in the ruins of an old stone outpost. "We can't see them, can't catch them, but we feel them. They're waiting." His words were calm, but his eyes betrayed unease. "I've sent for extraction, but it may take days. Until then, you're our shield." She gave no answer. She didn't need to. She knew the truth, she wasn't their shield. She was the target. That night the moon was thin, the stars sharp above the broken walls. She set her rifle on the highest point of the ruin, scanning the ridges as the others slept. Hours passed. The cold sank into her bones. And then she saw it, faint, nearly invisible. A shimmer where no shimmer should be, as though a piece of the night had shifted. She pressed her cheek tighter to the stock, her breathing shallow. The distance was nearly 3 kilometers. No rifle should be accurate at that range. But she knew better. So did whoever was out there. She didn't fire. Not yet. This was a duel, and in a duel the first to move often lost. She studied the shimmer, the faint suggestion of a scope angled low, searching, waiting for her to make the mistake. She smiled faintly in the dark. They were patient. Good. That meant they would make it interesting. She slowly adjusted her position, rolling into deeper shadow, leaving only the faintest edge of her lens exposed. Minutes stretched into hours. Her muscles burned, her eyes watered, but she remained still. The shimmer never moved. 2 predators locked in silence. At dawn, the commander roused the men to move. She dismantled her rifle with calm precision, though her mind was still locked on the shimmer. It hadn't fired, hadn't revealed more than a breath. That restraint told her the rival was not hunting the unit. They were hunting her. Every step down the trail, she felt the unseen eyes pressing into her back. She let the men chatter nervously, but her silence carried farther than their words. She was already planning. By midday they reached another ridge line, a cliff overlooking a valley of broken forest and stone. The commander wanted to move fast through it, but she shook her head. "Trap," she said simply. It was the first word she had spoken in days, and it froze him. He didn't argue. He trusted her now. The men held their ground while she advanced alone, crawling into position on the cliff, scope sweeping across the valley. There. A reflection. Not from a rifle this time, but from glass. Tiny fragments arranged in a pattern meant to draw her eye. She didn't look directly. She let her scope drift past, feigning ignorance, even as her pulse quickened. Clever. The rival was testing her, laying false signs to bait her shot. She ignored it, scanning the far side of the valley, looking not for what was shown but for what was hidden. That was when she saw it. A crow startled into flight, wings cutting across the light, and a shadow beneath it that shifted too slowly, too controlled. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot could be taken. But again she hesitated. No, it was too neat. Too easy. She exhaled slowly, pulling back from the scope. This sniper was building layers of traps, knowing she was disciplined enough to see them. Which meant the real strike hadn't come yet. And when it did, it would be perfect. She slid backward into the rocks, disappearing from sight. The next 3 days became a war of patience. Each time she scanned the horizon, she caught flickers, reflections, shadows, subtle movements, but never enough to reveal the rival fully. The men grew restless, their nerves fraying with every passing hour, but she never wavered. She rationed her breath, slowed her heart, and waited. Sniping was never about speed. It was about who broke the silence first. And she refused to break. Finally, on the 5th night, it happened. The unit had made camp in a dry riverbed, the men huddled near their fires, weary beyond words. She sat apart, her rifle across her knees when she felt it, a shift in the air, the kind that came just before thunder. Her skin prickled. She raised her rifle, scanning the ridges. And there it was. The rival. Not a shimmer this time, not a trick, but a full silhouette for the briefest second, framed against the stars. They had moved, finally, exposing themselves for a fraction of a breath. She didn't hesitate. Her shot cracked across the night, echoing against the stone. The figure vanished. The men leapt to their feet, startled and afraid, but she was already moving. She sprinted up the ridge, her body fueled by the certainty that the duel was not over. She reached the crest, scanning, searching, but the ground was empty. Only a drop of blood glistened on the rock, dark in the moonlight. She lowered her rifle, her breath steady but her chest heavy. She had hit them but not enough. They were alive. And worse, they would be back. When she returned to camp, the men looked at her with wide, unspoken questions. She gave them no answers. She lay beside her rifle, eyes fixed on the stars, the silence pressing harder than ever. This duel was not finished. It was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, another sniper with her patience, her skill, her will, was waiting for the final exchange. And she knew deep down that when that day came, only one of them would walk away. The mountains were behind them now, but the shadow was not. Even as the unit crossed into rolling plains and ruined villages, she felt it, the weight of unseen eyes, the pressure that never left. The rival sniper was alive, and their silence was more dangerous than any bullet. Days passed, each one tighter than the last. The soldiers began to believe they were safe, but she knew better. Silence didn't mean absence. Silence meant waiting. By the 7th night, they reached an abandoned city, its concrete towers cracked and skeletal, windows blown out like broken teeth. The commander ordered the men inside, thinking the walls would protect them, but she shook her head. Traps, she murmured, and again he listened. They camped in the open courtyard instead, the shadows of ruined buildings looming over them. She found her place on the roof of a collapsed factory, rifle steady, eyes searching every shattered window. The rival was here. She could feel it in her bones. The night dragged on, heavy with tension. Every gust of wind through the hollow structures sounded like footsteps. Every shifting shadow was a scope's reflection. Hours passed, her muscles screaming from stillness, her breath slow and even. Then, movement. A flicker of light 3 towers over, too faint for any ordinary eye to catch. She saw it. But she didn't fire. Not yet. She had learned the rhythm of her rival. They wanted her to shoot first. They wanted her to reveal herself. So she waited. And then it came. A crack split the night, faster than thought. The bullet struck the roof inches from her cheek, sparks exploding into her face. She rolled left, steadying her rifle, scope already aligned. The rival had fired from the tower's 4th floor, she was certain of it. She zeroed in, finger tightening. But the window was empty. A decoy. She froze. Another shot rang out, this one closer, tearing stone where her chest had been seconds before. She dropped flat, heart pounding but breath steady. The rival was moving faster now, shifting positions between shots, forcing her to chase. Clever. Deadly. She slid backward across the roof, crawling into deeper shadow. The men below were shouting, panicking, firing wildly into windows that held nothing. She ignored them. This was no fight for them. This was hers alone. She steadied her rifle, scanning each building methodically, looking not for flashes or figures but for absence. The one window too dark, the one angle too quiet. And then she saw it, a faint distortion against cracked glass on the tallest tower. Not light. Not movement. Just the subtle curve of a scope catching breath. She exhaled. Fired. The shot split the night, glass exploding outward. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a shadow fell. A figure dropped from the fourth floor, tumbling hard against the courtyard below. The men gasped, rifles raised, but she knew better than to celebrate. She kept her scope trained on the body, searching for twitch, breath, any sign of trickery. The shadow lay still, broken against the stone. The commander signaled men forward. They crept cautiously, rifles aimed. One nudged the body with his boot. It was there, flesh and blood, dressed in dark combat gear, a rifle still strapped across its chest. The soldiers cheered weakly, relief washing over them. But she didn't lower her rifle. Something clawed at her mind, something wrong. She slid down from the roof, landing in the courtyard as the men searched the body. She knelt, eyes sharp. The rival's face was hidden behind a mask. She reached out, pulled it free, and froze. It wasn't the sniper. It was a decoy. A double. A man with no skill in his eyes, a body thrown forward to mislead her. The realization struck too late. The shot came from behind. Stone shattered near her boots, the echo rolling through the courtyard. The men scattered, shouting, bullets flying in every direction. She spun, rifle raised, scanning the shadows of the ruined factory across the square. A window flickered. She dove for cover as another round screamed past her head. This was the true rival, clever enough to send bait, ruthless enough to use a body as distraction. Her chest tightened, not from fear but from recognition. She had found them. Finally. The duel began in earnest. Shot after shot cracked through the night, each one closer, sharper. She moved between rubble and stone, keeping low, keeping quiet. The rival mirrored her every motion, anticipating her shifts, cutting off her angles. It was like hunting herself. Hours passed in that deadly rhythm. Fire, move, wait, fire again. The men had long stopped trying to help, their rifles useless against shadows. They stayed low, leaving the duel to its rightful players. By dawn, the courtyard was torn with bullet scars, shattered glass, and silence. She crouched behind the skeleton of a burnt-out vehicle, her rifle steady, eyes burning from exhaustion. Across the way she finally caught sight of them, full form this time, framed in the hollow window of the tallest tower. Their rifle gleamed faintly in the rising sun. They were waiting for her, just as she was waiting for them. A perfect stalemate. She closed her eyes for a moment, slowing her breath. She thought of every lesson, every shot she had ever taken. This wasn't about speed anymore. It wasn't even about skill. It was about who would outlast the other. Who would break the silence first. She opened her eyes. The rival moved, just a fraction, shifting their rifle into line. It was enough. She fired. The crack echoed through the city, louder than all the shots before. For a moment, nothing. Then the rivals slumped forward, their rifle falling from the window, their body tumbling through air before crashing against the stone. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause. She lowered her rifle slowly, her heartbeat steady, her breath calm. The men began to cheer again, but she ignored them. She walked across the courtyard toward the fallen rival, each step heavy with the weight of certainty. She knelt, pulled the mask from their face. This time it was real. Sharp eyes, cold even in death. A mirror of herself, a shadow that had hunted her across valleys and ruins. She closed those eyes with her hand, standing in silence. There was no triumph. No victory. Only the end of a duel that had begun the moment she made the impossible shot. She turned back to the men, who stared at her with awe and fear mingled as one. Without a word, she slung her rifle over her shoulder and walked into the rising sun. For the first time in weeks she felt the silence lift. The eyes that had followed her were gone. But deep inside she knew the world was watching now. The story of her shot, of her duel, would spread. And somewhere, others would hear it. Others would come. There would always be another impossible shot waiting. And when it came she would be ready. The city was quiet after the duel, but it was the wrong kind of quiet. Not peace, not safety, just the stillness before a storm. The rival sniper lay broken in the courtyard, their rifle beside them like a second corpse. She hadn't spoken a word since the shot, and the men knew better than to ask. They moved quickly through the ruins, careful not to linger. But she felt it with every step. The end of one duel was only the beginning of another. 2 days later, as they crossed into the lowlands, the whispers began. The soldiers heard them in villages, carried by merchants and refugees alike. A sniper who made impossible shots. A ghost in the mountains. A duel in a ruined city where silence itself had broken. The stories traveled faster than the unit. And with each retelling, her name, though never spoken aloud, grew sharper, more dangerous. Legends were double-edged. They inspired fear. and they drew predators. The commander tried to hide his concern, but his eyes betrayed him. "They'll come for you now," he said one night as they camped beside a dried river. "Not just one. Teams. Hunters. They'll want to be the one who kills the ghost." She didn't answer. She knew he was right. But she also knew something else. This was never about wanting. It was about inevitability. The moment she had dropped the fugitive with the shot no one thought possible, she had stepped into a world where every bullet was an invitation. The first hunters came at dawn 3 days later. Not snipers this time, close-range killers, mercenaries hired to test her defenses. They struck the camp in silence, moving like shadows through the riverbed. The soldiers panicked, rifles clattering, but she was already awake. Her rifle barked once, then again, dropping 2 before the others even realized they had been spotted. She moved like smoke through the chaos, her rifle never missing, her body never still. When it was over, the riverbed was quiet again, 7 bodies cooling in the dust. The commander looked at her, eyes wide with something between awe and dread. She only cleaned her weapon. But she knew these were not the true threat. They were scouts, sacrifices meant to measure her. And somewhere beyond the horizon, others were watching, calculating. She felt their gaze at night, in the pauses between the wind, in the silence after her own breath. Snipers. Hunters like her. The duel had not ended in the ruined city. It had only widened. When the unit finally reached extraction, helicopters cutting the sky with their blades, she lingered at the edge of the clearing. The men rushed forward, desperate for escape. The commander hesitated, turning back. "Come with us," he said. His voice was more plea than order. For the first time she looked at him fully, her eyes unblinking, steady. "They'll follow," she said. "And if I'm with you they'll kill you first." He wanted to argue. But he didn't. He only nodded. Then he boarded the helicopter, leaving her standing alone as the blades lifted them into the clouds. The silence after was heavier than before. She slung her rifle across her back and turned toward the horizon. Alone now, she could move without the weight of protecting others. Alone, she could hunt as she was meant to hunt. She disappeared into the forest, her footsteps swallowed by the earth, her figure fading into legend. Weeks passed. In one country, a warlord was found dead from over 2 kilometers away, the shot fired through layers of fog no ordinary rifle could pierce. In another, an assassin was discovered lifeless before he could even draw his blade, a single bullet through the heart at night with no moon to guide the shot. The stories grew. A ghost with a rifle, unseen until the trigger pulled. Some swore she wasn't human. Others said she was death itself, given form. She ignored the stories. But she couldn't ignore what followed them. The hunters came in numbers now. Rival snipers, mercenaries, soldiers with reputations of their own. They came from cities, deserts, frozen tundras. Each one wanted to test themselves against her. Each one wanted the legend. None survived. Some fell in duels that lasted hours, others in seconds. She remembered each shot, each silence, but never with pride. Pride was weakness. For her, it was survival. For them, it was a grave. But with every duel, she noticed something troubling. They were learning. The hunters weren't random. They moved with discipline, coordination, almost as if directed by a single hand. The thought grew heavier with each encounter. Someone wasn't just spreading her legend. Someone was shaping it, pushing her into the open, testing her limits. The realization cut sharper than any bullet. She was not only hunted. She was being studied. One night, as she rested in the ruins of another forgotten outpost, she found the proof. A small mark etched into stone, hidden where only a trained eye would see it. A sniper's code, an old symbol used in secret by those who lived by the long shot. It traced it with her fingers, her jaw tightening. The rival she had killed in the city had not been alone. They had belonged to something larger. A network. A brotherhood. A shadow guild of snipers who operated beyond nations, beyond wars. And now she had their attention. The fire in her chest steadied as she sat in the silence. She had thought the duel ended when the rival fell. She had thought the storm had broken. But now she understood. That duel had only been the initiation. The shot that made her a target was the same shot that had made her worthy. The guild was watching. And they would come, one by one, until she either joined them or fell to them. She cleaned her rifle slowly, deliberately, every motion sharp against the quiet night. The decision wasn't made in words but in silence. She would not run. She would not hide. If they wanted to come, they would find her ready. And if the guild of snipers wanted a duel, she would give them one. Not once. Not twice. For as many times as it took until the silence was hers again. She lay back against the stone, her eyes on the stars. Somewhere out there, more scopes were aligning, more hunters preparing. The world had said no one could make that shot. She had proved it wrong. And now the world would learn something else. No one could hunt the ghost and live. The night was colder than the mountains, sharper than the ruins, and quieter than death itself. She sat on the ridge, her rifle laid across her knees, the stars reflected faintly in its steel. The symbol she had found carved into stone was etched into her mind, heavier than any bullet. A guild of snipers. Not rumor, not legend, real, alive and watching. The thought did not frighten her. It sharpened her. A single rival was dangerous. Many rivals, bound by discipline and patience, were something else entirely. The first sign came 3 nights later. She was moving through a valley of dead trees when she felt it, the subtle silence heavier than wind. She froze, every muscle quiet, her breathing shallow. Then she saw it, a flicker of light on a far ridge. Not a scope. A signal. Her chest tightened. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted her to know. She lifted her rifle slowly, scanning the ridge, but no one was there. Only the flicker now gone. At dawn she found their mark again, etched into a boulder at the valley's edge. A message. She traced it with her fingers, reading the code between the lines. The first trial begins. She stood for a long time, the morning sun washing across her face, then turned and walked on. If they wanted a trial, she would answer. That night the trial came. The abandoned village was silent, its roofs collapsed, its wells dry. She entered slowly, her rifle already raised, her boots brushing against broken stone. The air pressed tight, suffocating. She crouched behind a shattered wall, scanning the upper windows. Nothing. No shimmer, no flicker, no shadow. But she felt them. More than one this time. At least 3, maybe 4. Watching. Waiting. The first shot cracked like thunder, shattering the silence. She dropped instantly, rolling behind stone as dust rained over her. The bullet had struck inches from her shoulder, too close to be random. She didn't return fire. Not yet. Another shot came from her left, then another from above. 3 angles. 3 hunters. Coordinated. They were not here to kill her quickly. They were here to measure her, to watch how she moved under pressure, how long she lasted. She crawled into shadow, pressing herself against cold stone. Her heartbeat slowed, her breath deepened. She scanned the rooftops, windows, broken alleys. Then she saw it, a glint at the edge of a bell tower. She fired once, clean and fast. A figure slumped forward, falling silently into the dust below. The first hunter was gone. The others didn't break. They adjusted, shifting fire. A round snapped against the stone above her head, another whistled past her ear. She ducked into a ruined alley, moving fast but silent, her rifle low. She reached the edge of a courtyard, crouched behind rubble, scope raised. She searched the angles carefully, waiting. Then a mistake. A crow startled into flight from a rooftop, wings flaring against dawn. She saw the rifle barrel hidden beneath it. Her shot came before the hunter could adjust. The second body fell, lifeless against the tiles. 2 down. But the silence didn't ease. The third was clever. Too clever. No flash, no reflection, no movement. She crawled deeper into shadow, scanning, waiting, but there was nothing. Hours passed. The village held its breath. Her muscles burned from stillness, her throat ached with thirst, but she didn't move. Patience was her weapon as much as the rifle. Then, at last, it came, a faint scrape of stone against stone on the far edge of the square. She turned her scope, saw the barrel emerging from rubble and fired. The third fell before they could fire again. She waited, breath steady. 3 bodies. The silence returned, heavy, suffocating. She thought it was over. Then the fourth shot came. It tore through the wall inches from her cheek, the sound sharp, vicious. She dropped flat, rolled, raised her scope, but nothing. No glint, no shadow, only emptiness. She froze. The fourth hunter wasn't like the others. They weren't rushing, weren't careless. They were waiting. Testing. Measuring her silence against their own. The duel stretched into the night. Hours passed in utter stillness, each second balanced on a knife's edge. She moved inch by inch, shifting position with the wind, never the same silhouette twice. The hunter mirrored her, unseen but always present. It was no longer about shots fired. It was about who would break the silence first. When dawn broke, the village was bathed in pale light. She crouched inside the ruins of a schoolhouse, her scope fixed on the bell tower. Then at last she saw it, a faint shimmer, the kind only the rising sun could reveal. The rival had shifted just a fraction, just enough. She exhaled slowly, her finger tightening against the trigger. One breath. One heartbeat. The shot cracked across the square. The shimmer collapsed. A body slid into view, falling from the tower's edge. The silence after was absolute. She lowered her rifle slowly, her hands steady, her heartbeat calm. 4 hunters. 4 bodies. The first trial was finished. But as she moved through the ruins, checking each body, she knew the truth. These weren't the guild's best. They were the opening move, the warning. Each one had been skilled, disciplined, but not equal to her. Not yet. She found the mark carved again into stone, deeper this time, sharper. Another message. You are worthy. The next begins. She stared at it for a long time, then slung her rifle over her shoulder. The silence followed her out of the village, heavy as the dawn. She didn't fear the next trial. She welcomed it. Because now she understood what the guild wanted. They weren't only hunting her. They were shaping her. Forging her. And she would let them. Because when the final trial came, when she faced the best of them, she would not be the hunted. She would be the ghost they could never catch. The ruins faded behind her, but the silence stayed. She carried it with her across plains and rivers, into forests where the trees leaned close like listeners. 4 hunters had fallen, each one skilled enough to bury a lesser sniper. But they had not been the guild's best. She knew it the moment she found the mark. Carved into stone, its edges deliberate, its message unmistakable. The next begins. They weren't chasing her to end her. They were shaping her. The question was, into what? Days passed without a shot. She traveled alone, her rifle a shadow across her back, her eyes forever scanning ridges and windows. Each night, she expected a crack in the dark, a bullet tearing silence apart. But none came. Instead, she found signs. A coin resting on a stone in the middle of a trail, its surface scratched with the same guild mark. A line of crows startled into flight above a ridge, too perfect to be chance. A mirror shard left upright on the forest floor, reflecting her own face back at her. They weren't hunting now. They were speaking. The message came in full on the 10th night. She was camped near a dried riverbed, her fire low, when the whisper reached her. Not words carried by wind, real words, spoken in a voice close enough to chill her spine. You could be more. She turned instantly, rifle raised, scanning the dark. Nothing. Only silence. Then the voice again, this time from a different direction. Why waste yourself running? Join us. She crouched lower, eyes sharp, scanning for heat, for movement, for anything. But the voice was everywhere and nowhere, circling her like the wind. She knew the trick. Directional speakers carefully placed, designed to disorient. They had surrounded her, not with bullets, but with sound. She didn't fire. She didn't move. You've killed 4, the voice continued. Calm, almost reverent. But they were the first rung of the ladder. You know this. You felt it. Silence stretched, then another voice cut in, deeper, harsher. The guild is not your enemy. It is your home. You were never meant to fight for soldiers who mock you. You were meant for us. For the shot no one else can make. She kept her breathing even, her hands steady. They wanted to pull her into speaking. Into breaking silence. She gave them nothing. The voices shifted, sharper now, pressing against her mind like knives. What are you running for? A name? A cause? You're already a ghost. Do you think the world thanks ghosts? No. It fears them. But with us the world would bow. Her eyes narrowed. Recruitment was more dangerous than a duel. A duel ended with one breath. This was designed to last forever, to crawl inside her head, to wear down the silence she lived by. She thought of the rival in the ruined city, of the hunters in the village. All of them had fired with skill, but none of them had spoken. This was different. This was the guild's true weapon. Not just rifles. Voices. Hours passed. The voices didn't stop. They spoke of her kills, her duels, her impossible shot. They recited details no outsider should know. Her training, her first long-range strike, the way her instructor had once laughed and said, "No one can make that shot." She stiffened, but she did not answer. Silence was her shield. Finally, just before dawn, the voices fell quiet. For a moment she thought it was over. Then a single figure stepped into the riverbed, tall and calm, their rifle slung across their shoulder. No mask. No trick. Their eyes met hers across the silence. And for the first time she saw it, the same stillness she carried. A reflection of herself. You don't need to run, the figure said softly. You've already proven yourself. Join us and you will never be hunted again. Join us and you will become what you were meant to be. She raised her rifle slowly, steady. The figure didn't move. Didn't flinch. They only watched her, their eyes steady, their breathing calm. She held the sight on their chest, her finger brushing the trigger. Silence stretched, heavier than any bullet. Then she lowered the rifle. The figure's eyes flickered. Surprise, maybe respect. She didn't speak. She turned her back on them, walking into the trees, her footsteps silent. If they wanted her answer, that was it. Not submission. Not surrender. But refusal. She would not join. She would not be shaped. She would not let them own her silence. When she was gone, the figure remained in the riverbed, the guild's mark carved into the earth at their feet. So be it, they murmured, their voice carried by the wind. The trials continue. She felt it before she even reached the ridge. The air was sharper, the silence heavier. The guild would not stop now. They had tested her with hunters, with patience, with voices. Next would be worse. Not trials. An army of shadows. A storm of silence. And she would meet it the only way she knew how. Rifle in hand. Breath steady. Silence unbroken. Because they were right about one thing. She was no soldier's weapon. No man's shield. She was the ghost. And no guild, no voice, no hunter could take that from her. The forest thinned into open plain, a stretch of cracked earth under a sky wide enough to swallow her whole. Here there were no ruins to hide behind, no shadows deep enough to mask her breath. Only distance. Distance and silence. She knew the guild had chosen this place for a reason. Out here, it was patience against patience, scope against scope, the purest form of their art. She stopped at the center of the plain, crouching low, her rifle sweeping across the horizon. Nothing. But she felt it, the weight of eyes. Not one. Many. The silence was too thick, too precise. She lay flat, cheek against dust, and scanned. A glimmer on a ridge a mile away. A distortion in the air above a dry creek bed. A crow startled into flight from a boulder too smooth to belong here. 4 hunters again, no. 5. She adjusted her scope. 6. A full strike team. Her chest tightened, but not from fear. This was what she had been waiting for. Not whispers. Not voices in the dark. The storm. The first shot cracked across the plain, carving dust inches from her ribs. She rolled hard, swung her rifle, fired once. A shimmer on the ridge collapsed, the first body falling. But before the echo even died, 2 more shots answered from opposite sides, pinning her against the earth. She dug elbows into dust, crawling, her body flat against the ground, moving inch by inch. Every breath was a calculation. Every second a gamble. She reached a shallow dip in the plain, pressed her body into it, and stilled. Shots rained above, carving scars into the dust. They thought she was trapped. Good. She exhaled, long and slow, and raised her scope through a gap in the dirt. The creek bed. She saw it, the faint shimmer of heat, the curve of a rifle. 1 breath. 1 heartbeat. Her shot split the silence. The shimmer collapsed. 2 down. 4 left. But they adjusted faster this time. They didn't fire blind. They tightened their circle, their angles closing, their patience sharp as knives. For long minutes nothing moved. She lay still, her eye burning against the scope, her muscles trembling with the effort of silence. Then, there. A flash of movement on the horizon, so faint it could have been wind. She fired. Dust exploded, but no body fell. A decoy. The answering shot ripped past her cheek, so close it burned. She rolled hard, dust swallowing her, her rifle clutched tight. Her heart hammered, but she didn't break. Silence again. Always silence. She shifted position, crawling toward the boulder at the far edge of the dip. It wasn't cover. Not enough. But it gave her an angle. She reached it, pressed tight, and waited. The guild thrived on impatience. If she gave them nothing, they would move. And when they moved, they would reveal themselves. Minutes bled into hours. The sun climbed higher, the air shimmering with heat. Her lips cracked, her throat dry, her muscles screaming. Still she didn't move. Then at last, movement. A ripple of shadow against the glare, a rifle sliding into position. Her scope found it. Her shot cut it down. 3 down. The silence after was sharper than any shot. The remaining hunters shifted instantly, their fire coordinated, rounds carving the boulder to dust around her. She crawled away, rolling hard, her body pressed flat to earth, her rifle dragging with her. She reached another dip, smaller this time, shallow enough to feel useless, but it bought her seconds. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. She saw it then, a flash of light on the far horizon, too perfect to be chance. Her scope caught the outline of a figure just before the barrel steadied. She fired. Dust bloomed. The figure dropped. 4 down. But the 5th was ready. The shot slammed into the ground beside her, throwing dirt across her face. She turned instantly, scope sweeping, but saw nothing. Only the shimmer of heat, the ripple of distance. She shifted again, crawling deeper into the dip, every movement measured, every breath steady. The silence stretched. Hours more. The sun sank lower, the plane burning orange, shadows stretching long. She scanned, her scope moving in slow arcs. Then she found it, a faint distortion at the edge of shadow, a rifle's curve betrayed by light. Her finger tightened. The shot cracked. The distortion collapsed. 5 down. Only 1 left. But this one was different. She felt it immediately. The silence shifted, colder, heavier. The last hunter wasn't moving. Wasn't rushing. They were waiting. The same patience she carried. The same stillness. A reflection of herself. The duel stretched into night. Darkness swallowed the plane, the stars glittering like rifle scopes in the sky. She lay still, every muscle screaming, every heartbeat loud in her ears. The last hunter waited, silent, unseen. Hours passed. Neither moved. Neither fired. It was no longer a hunt. It was a mirror. When dawn broke, the plane was washed in pale gold. She blinked against the light, her scope sweeping slowly. Then she saw it, the faintest shimmer on the horizon, a barrel shifting as the sun caught it. One mistake. One breath too fast. Her shot cracked across the distance, splitting the silence. The shimmer fell. She lay still for a long time, her chest rising and falling, the rifle steady in her hands. 6 hunters. 6 bodies. The plane was silent again, but not empty. She felt the guild in that silence. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. She stood at last, her rifle slung across her back, her body aching, her throat raw. The mark was there, carved into the dust itself, precise and sharp. The next begins. She stared at it, then turned away, her footsteps carrying her into the rising sun. The strike team had fallen. But the silence told her what was coming. Not trials. Not voices. Not teams. The guild's best. The one no one had ever seen, the ghost among ghosts. And when that moment came, she would be ready. Because she was no longer just hunted. She was the storm. The end.